Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Andreya Shaak from ECI Systems. Thank you so much for tuning into our executive workshop, where we are going to discuss an intelligent approach to using data for new revenue opportunities. Since we won't have an opportunity to meet in person this year, I thought I'd spend a few minutes here introducing myself and giving you a little bit about my background. I have about 11 years of energy industry experience, 7 of which are at ECI. I took a little sabbatical in the middle to work on the retail side for about 4 years, where I gained a lot of experience in operations, sales and partner management, technology, and really just generally retail back office optimization. Here at ECI, my role is manager of product development, and I kind of do a little bit of everything. I help out on the prospect side. I oversee gap analysis for migrating clients, and I also provide business and development support for our product roadmap. Here's what we're looking to cover in the next couple of minutes. I'll try to keep it relatively short. The topics that we want to dive into are, again, specific to using data to identify new revenue opportunities. And so the first thing we'll look at are what are the available data points that retailers have access to. Then we'll talk a little bit about some new revenue opportunities that we have seen emerging in the market that come from the access to data. And lastly, we'll talk about building an executable game plan. So now that you have the data and the new revenue opportunities identified, how do you bring that to fruition in your retail environment? We'll also, at the conclusion of the presentation, talk about an exciting giveaway that we're doing this year. So 2 individuals will have the opportunity to win a new iPhone 12 just by visiting our virtual booth. So if you stay tuned to the end of this presentation, you'll get some more details about how to enter that giveaway and when we'll be announcing those winners. So let's just jump right in here. And again, we're going to cover first the data points. So what data points do you have access to on the retail side? Where can you get that information? And a little bit more about how we can channel this into thinking about new revenue opportunities. Just taking a look at this slide initially, we can see there are a lot of data points, right? So we've got meter information, customer information, sales data, payment and credit worthiness information about customers. So it's a lot of data that you have access to on the retail side. And I think before we jump into some of these, it's worth noting, not everything is derived from your billing and EDI system, okay? So some of this data might be external sources, might be customer provided, might be sales related. So, you want to think about this in a holistic approach. There's a lot of data, but it's not all just coming from EDI and billing. One that typically does come from EDI and billing, though, is your meter level usage. And so we can see the first couple bullet points there, just generally usage data, interval versus summary. From a historical perspective, we also have access to shaping patterns and load profiles for certain customer segments. And also one thing that is going to be really critical in the revenue opportunities that we chat about is SMT data, which again is outside of the billing and EDI realm. We also have access to customer preference data points. So how does the customer prefer to receive their bill? How do they pay that bill? And specifically, how do they prefer to be contacted when it comes to outreach? Text, email, phone call, all of these are relatively important data points that will help you identify not just which type of new revenue opportunities will be helpful, but how you can market those opportunities as well. Payment activity. So is the customer in collections, or what is their credit score or credit worthiness? These types of payment related data points will help you identify which customer segments might be the right target for your new revenue opportunities or maybe more sophisticated products. A newer inclusion in this is also COVID status. In the ERCOT market, we have access to know which customers are being affected more severely by the COVID pandemic, in which case you might tailor certain types of programs to those customers or exclude them from others. Customer status. This is specific to, let's say, win-back campaigns, or if you are targeting customers that have dropped, you want to have the most information as possible about when, how, and why the customer dropped, as well as information for active customers on their contract expiration dates or renewal dates. So that way you know when to start marketing to those customers in relation to current contract commitments. And lastly, of sales data. So here we can see sales information for that individual customer segment, and also if they are on any types of products where they're consuming or utilizing real-time pricing and market data. Those are all data points that you can use in their entirety when you're thinking of new revenue opportunities. So segueing into that topic, what are those new revenue opportunities now that you've identified all the different data points you have access to? And so this slide just represents kind of an overall look at the top level areas that you have access to from a data perspective. So again, meter, payment, status, sales, things like that. And one of the most important parts of this, which we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about the execution side, is how do you use all of that data? How do you consume that in a usable way and make sure that it's available for your bright ideas on the revenue side? We'll get into that a little bit later, but I just want to highlight here that that's a really important piece of this puzzle, is that having access to this data is great, but how do you actually use it in a real way? And so the two areas that I wanted to identify during this presentation are starting with the first one, which is prepay programs. We see traditional and pay-as-you-go being the emerging two prepay programs that really rely heavily on access to customer data. And then we also want to look at creative products. So we're going to go through a couple of these examples, but really when you look at outside of the box product offerings to customers, data becomes the most important aspect of that. So starting with those prepay models, the first one, which retailers have seen historically, is the traditional prepay model. And then the data points that you would use there would be creditworthiness for those customers, which customers are potentially lower on the credit scale, which you would then want them to be on a traditional prepay model. That also then looks at payment data for customers. So, as they pay on time or potentially not, you might want to look at a prepaid model for those inconsistently paying customers. And they also, the other data point that's critical here is the forecasting and shaping information. So knowing, which customers are going to consume what, so that you can come up with an intelligent idea as to what you should be charging your customers in advance. And then the second option is a little bit of a trendier prepay model. It's the pay-as-you-go model. We've seen this come into emergence in ERCOT and also more recently in the Northeast, where we have access to SMT data and real-time market pricing data. Those are obviously the two key data points that we look at when it comes to the pay-as-you-go prepay subscription type model, but also access to weather and related usage data, as well as customer contact preferences, will help mitigate some of those price spikes we saw in ERCOT last summer, where customers were on these models but not aware of large price spikes. So using data in this approach will allow you to mitigate those customer issues later on. Likewise, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but the creative products really rely on data. So these are just a couple examples of creative products we've seen come to the market in the last couple of years. The free nights, weekends, and holidays product is pretty popular at this point, relying on either shaping data, interval usage, or SMT data. Market-based pass-through products have also come into popularity, not just for commercial customers, but for resi customers that are looking to see a disproportionate amount of energy usage versus other charges allocated on their invoice. The free electricity products, where we see customers being able to get a credit back or a zero rate on their highest usage days every month. Again, really relying on SMT data or at least interval data there to identify which days or time periods customers are consuming the most during their cycle. Subscription programs represent, a creative product that has also gained popularity, where customers are able to take advantage of wholesale rates and green generation rates, as well as participating in loyalty and referral programs as well. And that last one there is relatively popular as well, looking at community solar and net metered programs. Obviously, those rely heavily on the integration of data points, especially net metered products, where you are required to offer certain product types to customers that indicate as net metered. So looking at those two very specific examples of revenue opportunities, the next logical step here is to identify what's your game plan. So how do you execute on those products? How do you have access to all of that data in a meaningful way? And as I'm sure many of you identified early on my sneak preview, it's really about a key tech partner or partners if you're working with multiple vendors. So you want someone who, a company that has transparency and access, gives you as the retailer access to tools and innovation. Security is obviously very paramount here. Ability to scale and be agile. And then also, as we talked about before, access to those real-time data feeds. These are all really important components of identifying a key tech partner or partners that you'll work with to execute on your vision. And one way we provide this at ECI is specifically through transparency and access. One of the biggest benchmarks of our service is that all of our clients have 24/7 access to their EDI and billing data. And we make it a really important point to make sure that every client has access to their data specifically through multiple means. So that means, you have access to a parallel mini SQL server, about 110 canned reports, and also a host of dashboards that make getting your data in and out of our platforms very simple and easy to use. When we look at the creative product side, the complex billing module really comes to play here because, as you can see in the screenshot on this slide, you can build your own products. So when you're coming up with the creative products we talked about before, you're not relying on your vendor to build out those products, test them for you, and give them to you in a nice, clean, neat box. What you can do in the platform is actually build out your own formulas and test them in a secure test environment to make sure that what you're building is actually what's coming out on the bill to the end consumer. All of that is available within our complex billing module, and also some tools that we've created to have plug and play things like pass-throughs, as you can see in this line loss example. And lastly, when it comes to transparency and access, I think working with a technology partner that values continuous communication with their client base as number one. So if you look at our annual user conference, where we gather all of our clients together, and also our monthly development recap sessions, where clients can log on to a webinar and get basically a complimentary training of all of the new development items from the previous month, that really kind of differentiates a partner that prioritizes transparency and access. And so that, if you are looking to use data in a meaningful way and also be creative in the revenue side, this is obviously one of the most important aspects of working with a technology partner. Likewise, market change intel, I think, is really important as well. So when we look at changing markets, places like Connecticut and ERCOT, even where markets are making changes on the fly, you want a provider and a partner that keeps you abreast of those changes. So that way, if you are working on building something out, you have a really clear way of how to get there. Excuse me. And lastly, this hub and spoke approach, I think, is really important. What can you expect from a technology vendor, and what can they own versus what can you kind of piecemeal with best in breed other vendors out there? And so here's just a quick snapshot of some of the things that we provide to make the billing and CIS and EDI side really simple. If you plan to use internal tools or even other vendors out there. We talked a little bit about this data access before, but working with our extensive API list, you have an unparalleled access to data as well as a parallel mini SQL Server database of all of your production information. And then as we spoke about before as well, the security aspect is really critical. So you can expect when you work with a vendor like ECI, you will have access to world-class security as well. So what does that bring me to in kind of summation of this presentation? Obviously, more than ever before, data is key. So when you're coming up with new revenue opportunities, when you are looking at access to data, really using working with, I should say, a vendor or a partner that prioritizes data and makes it really simple and easy for you as the retailer to consume that information, that's the key. And so that brings me to our giveaway, and we're going to use that data as key as kind of a selling point here. So again, we are raffling off 2 iPhone 12. That's the newest model of the iPhone. If you're not an iPhone user, we can work something out where we'll get you a latest model of an Android, but I think the iPhone 12 looks pretty slick. So here's how you'll enter to win. You'll visit our EMC virtual booth. There's a text box at the very top right-hand side of the screen that says Enter Giveaway. And when you enter that pop-up box, you'll type in data as is key as the key phrase. So if you remember our last slide, that's our kind of key takeaway from this presentation. So you'll use that as your password or key phrase, if you will, to enter the iPhone 12 giveaway. You also want to enter your contact info so that we know who you are and how to get in touch with you, and hit send. We'll be announcing 2 winners. They will be contacted at the conclusion of each day. So 1 winner on Tuesday, November 17th, and 1 winner on Thursday, November 19th. If you have any more questions about that, you can visit our booth. There's a contest rules in the resources section, or you can obviously get in touch with us and ask questions if you have any. That leads me to my very last slide here. So please, if you do want to enter the giveaway, visit us at our virtual booth. But if you have any questions about this presentation or any of the topics that we presented here, please feel free to visit us there. Or here on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, my contact information again. Feel free to get in touch, and we look forward to speaking with everyone soon. Thanks again for listening in.